Hello! Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Backstage Stories. I am Joe Carroll. Thank you for joining me again. And I am, as always, possibly wearing pants, possibly not. I'm so excited for this one. This is going to be a slightly different Backstage Stories today. And we're going to get right to it. Get your questions ready. Drop them in the chat. I'm so excited to be talking to my friend, my mentor from college, Cynthia Kortman Westphal, who is an associate professor and has been on faculty at the Department of Musical Theater at the University of Michigan since 2004. And she's a native of Holland, Michigan. So we love local. While on sabbatical from the University of Michigan, and here is why I asked her to be on this week, she music directed the first national tour of Come From Away. She has done a million shows, including A Christmas Story, Lion King on Broadway. She conducted over 400 performances in 30 cities across the US and Canada of Come From Away. Her Broadway credits include The Lion King, where she was an original company member, an associate music director, conductor, and keyboard player for 7 years. Christmas Story, like I mentioned, which was written by Oscar and Tony Award winning University of Michigan Musical Theater Department graduates Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. She also conducted the first national tour of Christmas Story, played keyboards for the show's run at Madison Square Garden. Her additional credits on Broadway include Miss Saigon and the Gershwin's Fascinating Rhythm, where she was a music supervisor, music director, and conductor. She's a graduate of Hope College and holds a master's from Western Michigan. I mean, how more local could it get? She put up with me for 4 years, both on stage and in the pit. I got to play in a few of her orchestras, and I continue to bug her to this day. Welcome, rock star Cynthia Kortman Westphal. Cynthia, turn on your camera, say hi to the good people. Yay!
Hi, good people.
Hi. How are you?
Thanks for having me. It's so good to see you.
It is so good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for doing this. I know you have 10,000 things going on, including not so young children anymore. They must be like, they're not adults, but they're like, how old are your boys now?
Well, I just kicked them out of the house to get them out for the hour because they're very loud. And my almost 15-year-old was doing the driving as they were going down. So we have a new driver's permit. He's 14, wow. Almost 15 in 2 weeks, and then I have another one that'll be 13 in 1 week.
Oh my gosh. Because I remember them when they were little itty baby children.
Baby babies.
So I'll get to like how we know each other. I mean, the Come From Away connection and the tour of Come From Away, which is coming through Grand Rapids at some point this fall. Obviously, a lot of pandemic contingent things, but Come From Away is happening in West Michigan, and so I wanted to talk to you about that. We'll get to that, but like, how do we know each other?
Am I answering that?
Yeah, you can answer that.
Well, I'm glad you reminded me of the year. So somewhere around, do I dare say the year, or does this age you?
Yeah, I mean, you can, you don't ask a lady her age, but yeah, 2008.
Somewhere in the 2000s when you were a student. Yes.
Right. From 2008 to 2012. I was a musical theater student at the University of Michigan, and I remember so many things, and we'll get to a lot of it, but just I do this with people when they come on this show because I trap them here in this live Zoom setting and they can't really go anywhere, but I get to tell them what they mean to me. And so I'll just do this. I'll make you super uncomfortable because you changed my life in college. You made me feel like you saw me the way that I hoped I could see myself as a musician and as an actor. You were the greatest acting teacher I've ever had, the greatest music teacher I've ever had. And I can't believe that I got to work with you so closely for 4 years and that I still get to work with you to this day when we talk about Air Supply and we talk about the Eagles and we'll get to all of those things. But I'm so grateful for you. You changed my life. And so Thank you. And
Wow, thank you. I
thank
feel
you.
like I was such a newbie when you were a student. I was such a new teacher
That seems crazy.
because I got there in 2004, fresh out of
Got
Lion
it.
King. I was
Right.
associate music director of Lion King. I took a leave from Lion King in order to teach for a year. Lion King actually gave me a 9-month leave of absence to go
Wow.
teach for a year, and I ended up quitting Lion King and staying, obviously, at the University of Michigan. But I really hadn't done any teaching to that
Yes.
up till that point. So I was really learning on the job, and I feel like I was so new. I feel like I'd be a better teacher now than I
Yeah.
was that. So I'm glad you feel like you got your money's worth.
More than my money's worth. I mean, it makes me want to go back to college. I mean, what was that transition like from Lion King to Michigan? Because I remember the story vaguely, but I mean, you're playing in the pit of one of the biggest Broadway musicals ever, and then the University of Michigan calls. What was this like? What was this transition?
Well, the way I got there was really strange. I'd been on Lion King, I think, for 7 years by that point. I'd done
Wow.
over 3,000 performances of Lion King and had no intention of leaving. But I was starting to, 7 years is a long time.
Yeah.
I was getting the 7-year itch. I was burning out a little bit. But at the same time, you kind of, as you know, having done long running shows, you get sort of locked into this might be the best job I've ever had in my life. How could I ever
Uh-huh.
leave? How can I ever
Uh-huh.
give up the stability?
Right.
And then I met my husband, and we got married, and we'd both been renting in New York for so long, so we thought, well, let's finally buy an apartment. And when we started looking for apartments, as you know, very expensive.
Oh yeah.
And we're both doing really well. We both had good jobs, and it was still like so expensive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
one day we're jogging in Central Park and, chatting as we jog. And I was like, if you could live anywhere else in the country, where would you go? And he said, Ann Arbor. I was like, but,
Really?
and he's a New Yorker. He had never been to Michigan. So I'm like, why would you say that? That's weird. And we're still jogging, just chit chat. And he goes,
Yeah.
oh, I don't. He's an urban planner type. So he's like, oh, I always see it on these top 10 places to live. That
Wow.
was the end of the conversation. I'm like, that's weird. You're weird. We keep jogging. We move on. The very next day, I'm sitting home by myself in the apartment and thought, isn't there a musical theater program in Michigan somewhere that's like really good? Like it was on my radar, Michigan.
Yeah.
So I go online at University of Michigan. I'm just looking at musical theater. I look under job postings, and there's a job posting that is literally what I do.
No.
So he
way.
came home that night, and I was like, how serious were you about Ann Arbor? And his answer was, well, what are the chances you're going to get the job? I'm like, I know. There's no chance I'm going to get the job. Why don't I just apply for the heck of it, and we'll see what happens, And then
Right.
I got the job. So then when we got the job offer, I think it's okay to say this, the money was really low.
Right. Right.
Comparatively to the Broadway show, I was like, wow, that's a big hit. And he's like, yeah, we can't move for that. No. And then I remember saying to him, don't you just feel sort of like there's a neon sign the universe is putting in front of us saying, go to Ann Arbor? And then at that point, I said, well, why don't I ask for leave of absence? What's the chances that Lion King's going to give it to me? And then they gave
Right.
it to me. Everything just kept falling into place.
Yeah.
And so we ended up moving to Ann Arbor
Oh my God. Oh my
without
God.
really thinking very hard about it. It kind of came out of the blue.
I love that, but also from a teaching perspective, because you chose so many people. I always hate the adage, because I do a lot of teaching too, that teachers can't do anymore any of this crap that like goes around. And it's like you were at the the top. You're at the top pinnacle. You're conducting Lion King. You're playing in the pit, and you're like, no, I want to teach. No, I want to give this information to the next generation or something like that. And you can buy a house for a lot less, I guess. That's probably helpful too.
Oh, in Ann Arbor, not as less as
maybe
you think.
maybe not actually. That's so freaking cool, and it's happening more and more where I see Jeff Packard and Chelsea Packard, who are my buddy from Bandstand. Jeff Packard and I did Bandstand together on Broadway, and he and his wife both were they're teaching it at Michigan now. I really want to teach at the University of Michigan. I want to know, maybe someday, very soon. But I love that story, and I love that. Now I think a lot of people, the role on Come From Away. So you were the music director and conductor, associate music director and conductor. What was the official title?
So of the tour, I was music director of the tour.
Got it. And then
conductor, music director, conductor, keyboard player, accordion player.
Yes, and we're going to get to the accordion in a minute.
But yes, official music director. Yes.
So that role, for people who don't know, what is like? Take us through the responsibilities and sort of what that job was for you.
Yeah. So for tours, usually there's a music director for each tour. And then often there's a music supervisor that supervises all the companies. So Ian Eisendrath was our music supervisor. He supervised the Broadway company, the tour, the Australian company, all of the companies that were popping up. So basically we did a big rehearsal process, a full 6-week rehearsal process in New York City with Ian. And he was maybe the best music supervisor I've ever worked with in terms of giving the information you needed and then really making it your own company. So he would often do a couple hours of rehearsal with me, and then he would leave and I would get the next 4 hours by myself with the company. And then the next morning he'd show up again for a couple hours, kind of set some things up, and then I would get the rest of the time. So it was so great the way he allowed a little autonomy and yet still got me all the information that I needed. And then once you get on the road, music director, you do all the performances, you conduct, you play.
You're sitting at the piano going like this and doing it's not like you're just standing there with a stick, and you're on stage the whole time.
And you're on stage. Yeah, Come From Away was by far the hardest show I've ever done in my life. Because it's on stage, it never stops. You don't get one single moment of break. You're just playing the whole time. Everything's on a click track, which was new for me. I had done shows that had partial click tracks. I'd never done a show that was 100% on a click track, which just means you're triggering little clicks that tell you what tempo of every single song at any given time. It's a lot of choreo.
Crazy.
And then a lot of your responsibility becomes maintaining the show as the years, over the course of hundreds of shows. As you know, it's really easy. You would think that doing a show over and over and over would solidify it, and instead it slides.
Yes.
In all different ways.
Yes, and that's one of the biggest things that I feel like nobody can teach you until you get into it. You're like, oh no, you're going to do a show for a long time, and it's going to get easier because it's literally the opposite. The longer you're in, the more things start to just deteriorate, and you have to prop it back up. And from the acting standpoint, you get sick and then you never get better. And I'm sure you had a million of those things that happen.
Yeah. You end up kind of being, you're very much a managerial position.
Right.
You're also a performer.
Right.
You also become a bit of a mediator for any issues that are going on. You become the, sort of the band therapist as needed. And, and then we did vocal rehearsals pretty much every week. Every single week, the cast was called into a vocal rehearsal for an hour or two to do brush-ups.
Wow.
So that was a big part of it. Come From Away has a really rich vocal design, I would almost say. Instead of vocal arrangements, I would say it's a real vocal design.
Yeah.
That almost the voice qualities become sort of its own character of the show. So we were constantly reminding singers
of what to do. Well, and it's interesting. I mean, because my wife Alex, who we talked to on the show I had her on the show 2 weeks ago, which is what I do. I come up with these harebrained ideas to do things, and I'm like, okay, Alex, you have to be involved in this in one way or another because that's just how it goes, I guess, when you're stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment together. But she did the show for over 2 years, and it was all of that was true, but from an acting perspective, it's 90 minutes. So yes, you're shot out of a gun, but you're not doing 3+ hours of Les Mis.
Right.
So you do get to show up at 7:30 and leave 2 hours later or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a pro, but it is you're sprinting for 90 minutes. You're not oh, I can just ease into this.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's like running the 800-yard dash.
Right.
You
Right.
you can't fully sprint it like you do a 100-yard dash, but it's
Right.
definitely not like a 5-miler where you're just gonna like pace yourself. Like
100%.
it's that really uncomfortable place of mostly sprinting, but you gotta pace yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But yeah,
100%.
I mean it's amazing what's packed into those
Right.
96 minutes. It really
I
is.
just love it. And we'll get to some clips of that down the road a little bit, because I want people to get a look at it again. But I wanted to know, I mean, one of the things that I'm so interested in still, even though I'm in the business, is like all of the different jobs that people can have in the theater. I mean, there's 10,000 things from front of house to back of house, crew, and musicians and various things. But like, you've had probably a dozen different jobs or more, like over in and around musical theater, from playing in the pit to being a conductor. I mean, what's the difference? I mean, this is a horrible question, but like, there's keyboard players, and there's associates, and there's this, and there's that, and there's this. I mean, how many different jobs have you had?
Oh wow.
As a musician and as a
yeah, a lot. Keyboard player, full-time keyboard player on a number of shows, which is different than being a sub.
Right.
Where maybe you come in only once a week or a couple times a week.
Right.
I've subbed for a lot of tours, which is a whole different animal than even subbing for Broadway. On Broadway, you get to go watch the show as many times as you need to in order to really learn it. When you sub on a tour, you are lucky if you can watch that show one time before they throw you in the fire. So that's really different.
We talk about that for just 2 seconds.
I've been an assistant conductor, which means maybe you're like the third in line to conduct. I've been the associate conductor, which means you're sort of second in line to conduct. I've been the associate conductor where the music director isn't there anymore, so you actually are the music director.
I mean, it's like there's just for people who love music. I mean, especially people coming through like young musicians, young piano players, especially. There are so many jobs in musical theater. Is kind of what I wanted to get to. A lot of people don't even realize it until I feel like you pull back the curtain a little, literally, and there's 50,000 things that you can do, as a musician in the theater, which is crazy. And we'll get to. I want to talk more about subbing on tours, because that was a whole crazy. That is a crazy thing. Oh my gosh, I had a question and it's gone. Oh my gosh, yes. Okay. So you are a professor at the University of Michigan, and then you leave to go conduct on Come From Away. And that was a sabbatical.
Yep.
Right? I feel like usually when people go on sabbatical, they like write a couple articles and like hang out, and like that's kind of it. And you said, no, we're going to take the whole family and we're going to go on the road for a year plus, and we're going to like, what? Talk to me. What were you thinking?
When you say it that way, I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. The short story is, it was not on my radar at all. I had a sabbatical coming up, which I knew about. I had no idea what I was going to do. I started putting out a few feelers here and there of like, hey, I'm going to have a year off if anyone has, whatever. And then when I was in New York doing one of the showcases for our senior class, I went to see Come From Away because Ian Eisendrath, the music supervisor, is a good friend. And I hadn't seen his show yet. I honestly didn't know anything about it. I knew it had something to do with 9/11.
Yeah.
And because I was living in New York City during 9/11, I had, if I could make the zero seem less than zero, that's how much interest I had in seeing Come From Away, believe it or not. I did not want to see that show. I had way too much trauma from living through it.
Yeah.
But you go see the show that like your buddies do because they're so proud of it. So I'm like, okay, I will go see it.
Yeah. A lot of my buddies felt that way about Frozen, but moving. Yeah.
trauma from that.
No, I totally get. But yes, no, you're so right though. I mean, they like, yes, you're like, I'm gonna go see my friend. I'm gonna support my friend.
Yeah. So I went, and right before I got there at 5 minutes before showtime, Ian met me on the street and was like, hey, great to see you. So glad you're here. I'm so glad you came. By the way, I'm really interested in maybe having you conduct the tour. So go enjoy the show. Bye. I'll see you after the show. And I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
So that's the filter I went into the show, was the filter of like, I'm already sitting down to see a show I don't really think I want to see. and now I'm looking at it through a filter of what I want to actually work on it. And then, of course, I was blown away. And I'll tell you, I was blown away by the show because it made me laugh in the first 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Like the first time the joke of like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so I told him we'd have the rest of school the other afternoon, you know, which y'all who go see Come From Away, which all go see, it's the best show. As soon as they made me laugh within the first minute of the show, I realized, okay, we are in good hands here. This is gonna, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be manipulative and real emotional, and instead it is sort of the opposite. It is not manipulative of your emotions at all. It is just the most feel-good thing ever, aside from Frozen, obviously. But so anyway, I came away from that thinking, oh, wow, not only would I love to do that, but I would love to do this show. Like, that's a story that is worth me uprooting my family for a year and pulling my kids out of school and somehow figuring out how to homeschool them while on tour. This is a story worthy of me doing that for. So
that's cool. Yeah,
it was cool. And a couple other offers came in for that sabbatical too, of a couple other Broadway shows actually. And at that point it really felt like, you know what, I've done Broadway shows. I haven't done a big tour. I have a family now. The idea that I could go on tour and my kids would get to see 30 cities across the country just felt like, you know, we could have gone back to New York for a year and we would have loved that too, but instead we thought, nope, let's do the tour. Let's go travel. And we made that, my husband and I a long time ago kind of made the decision that for all of these kind of things, either we all go or nobody goes.
Right.
So,
so cool.
When I did Christmas Story, it was also pulling out, 3 years in a row, I pulled the kids out of school for about 4 or 5 months at a time, and we packed everybody up, but we're really like, we travel as a pack.
Yeah. We
either all go together or nobody goes at all. So
that's so freaking cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, why don't we, Megan, we'll jump into some Come From Away clips to just show the people what we're talking about and to get them all hyped up for the fall. And we're going to show two. The first one is just a little bit more about the show. And then the second one features our guest playing the accordion, which we'll talk about afterwards.
I'm Irene Sankoff, and I'm the co-author of Come From Away.
And I'm David Hine, and I'm the other co-author and her husband. Come From Away tells the story of when 38 planes and thousands of passengers were diverted to the tiny community of Gander, Newfoundland, and the surrounding towns. The people were welcomed off the planes by the people here, and they gave them everything they possibly could.
The generosity in this story that happens in Newfoundland really rhymes with what it was like to be in New York on 9/12 and following. I think New Yorkers were their best self at that moment.
There were almost 7,000 people who landed here, and there was almost 9,000 people in town at the time. So we wanted to tell 16,000 stories in a 100-minute musical with 12 actors.
Suddenly I've got my way. Suddenly there's no one saying stay grounded. Looking down, passing them by.
You just can't tell the story without music.
There's very few moments where there's not music. I have been struck by how much the audience wants to tell their story after the show. You walk through the lobby and everybody comes up and wants to talk about the show and what they were doing that day.
It's been truly humbling to know that we've touched people's lives with this story, because I know we were incredibly touched.
You found your heart, but left a part of you behind.
And now, on the accordion.
Well, to all you pretty ladies waving from the dock, heave away, me jollies heave away.
There you are.
We do return to you, we'll make your cradles rock. Heave away, me jolly boys, we're all on the way.
The Lander boys are leaving us alone. Heave away, me jollies heave away. And if you find another, we got lovers on the road.
Heave away, me jolly boys, we're all on the way.
I just love it. It's just a little baby clip, and if you blink, like you might miss it, but there's Cynthia playing the accordion.
I can't believe you found that.
Yeah, that's from the good people at Megan, I think it's from the good people at Broadway Across America who dropped that in. So the accordion, how long did that take you to learn?
Oh my gosh. A good 6 months to get it to a place where I felt like I could be solid every show.
Wow.
The show opened in Seattle in October. I got my accordion in April before. And my poor family, God love
I know,
them.
it's not quiet.
Oh my God. I shed that accordion daily for hours a day until we opened. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. I mean, and the being on stage and being on stage with the actors, like you said, must have incredible benefit. And also it must be incredibly stressful. You can never sort of tune out and check your phone or like have a sip of coffee or something. You're in it the whole time. But I mean, that has to be incredibly energetic to be up there.
It was amazing. It really was maybe my favorite part of the show was the fact that it didn't have an intermission. You couldn't blink. You couldn't bother. It was actually really liberating to not even have an option to pick up a phone or to pick up a magazine during the off time. It really just kept you focused in the story the whole time, which is, ultimately why we do what we do.
Right.
Is to tell stories. And sometimes for musicians being in the pit, we sometimes feel a little forgotten, and during the big important scenes, we're down there hanging out, waiting for the next song. And for this show, you really feel a part of it the whole time, and it's just really satisfying.
That is so cool. Well, I on that note, I got to play in a couple of your bands, a couple of your orchestras, and we'll talk about that more later. But you set me up to sit in the pit with the guitar player at Wicked on Broadway.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I was maybe still a senior in college, or it was like right after I moved, and I went down and I sat with this guitar player, and he had been playing, I forget the guy's name, you probably remember.
Greg Scaff.
Yes, Greg. And he had played for so long, he played that book on Broadway, that he would read the New Yorker magazine and play the guitar. So he's playing the guitar in these cute, ripping solos. Like, he'd focus. He was focused, and he would sound unbelievable. But he had played for so long that he was just like kind of checking in on the New Yorker. And then he'd be like, okay, 1 second. Wow. And he would do his thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And, but I get it that that's, you're up there. You can never take a second. I want to know, and I feel like I asked you this a million years ago, but what was your journey to becoming a music director, to working in musical theater in general? Because you went to Hope, you went to Western and got a master's, both with piano, were they both?
Yeah, my bachelor's and master's are in classical piano performance. And I had teachers who were amazing, but who we only focused on classical. And in fact, my undergrad teacher she did not want me doing anything other than classical. So I mentioned to you, I think the first show I ever saw was Cats in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, at DeVos Performance
back in and I think that was somewhere in the middle of college for me. That was the only theater show production I'd ever seen. Then after college, between college and grad school, I did a summer stock where I played a couple shows. I'd never played shows before. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a classical nerd. I'm just playing notes on a page. I have no idea what's going on. Then I went and got a master's. Then I moved to New York with the idea that I was going to be an opera coach.
Because that's what the focus was to get to do all that training in the piano. Like you were going to be an opera coach.
Yes. And I had minored in opera in grad school. So that was what I thought I would do. I thought I would be like an orchestral pianist. I'd be an opera coach, classical, all of that. And I knew one person in New York City. It was an ex-boyfriend that I knew. And he was going to let me stay with him for a few days until I could find a place of my own in New York. And he was supposed to, this is pre-cell phones, by the way.
Right.
He was supposed to pick me up at the airport, take me to his place where I was going to stay for a few days or whatever. He didn't show up. Oh. That's why the ex-boyfriend, let's just say, no, he's a great guy. Yeah. But he didn't show up. So I'm sitting there at the airport. I don't know a soul. There's no cell phones, no nothing. I ended up stowing my luggage at the airport. I took a bus that said Times Square because it was literally the only, I didn't know New York at all. I'm like, Times Square, that sounds familiar. I guess I'll go there. It's a $10 bus ride. I still...
Oh my
So I spent $10, got on the bus, got dropped off in the middle of Times Square, and now I'm like,
$3, 2 bags.
now what? And I don't even have my bags. They're stowed at the
Right.
stowed at the airport.
$3 and nothing else.
So meanwhile, you know, I'm calling on the payphone. I just keep trying his place. He keeps not answering, and so it's now like almost 8 o'clock. And I thought, well, I'm not gonna like stand out here by myself for another how many hours till I track this guy down. And I'd never seen a Broadway show other than Cats in Grand Rapids. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna blow $50 on a Broadway show, which I only had about $500. That was literally all I had. And I walked up to what happened to be Crazy for You, bought a ticket up in the nosebleed section, and the show starts, and it was a woman conductor, which I had never seen in my life. Up until that point, I had never seen a woman conduct, other than there was a woman at Hope College who conducted the summer stock. That was it. But you know, I didn't know that was like. She did some other stuff at Hope College too. It wasn't her only job conducting. It just wasn't on my radar that women did that. So when I saw this woman conducting the Broadway production, there was something about that show. I think because it was Gershwin and my classical nerdness, Gershwin was close enough to like legitimate music that I was oh, I want to do this, you know, and the girls with the feathers and the, you know, it was so splashy.
Great music.
Oh, it's just amazing. It was an amazing score, beautiful production. And so that literally in my first hours of dropping into New York, I decided that's what I wanted to do instead of being an opera coach.
Wow.
So side note, my job, this is a much longer story than we have time for, but
it's literally why we're here though. It's like literally the point of all of this. So like, you know.
My first job in New York City was a child wrangler on the Broadway production of Tommy.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you don't know what a child wrangler is, it's basically the babysitter of the children who are performing in a Broadway show. So I was basically the Broadway babysitter for this production of Tommy on Broadway.
Yep. And those people are saints. Absolute saints. Having done a couple of shows with children, like the young Annas and young Elsas, they have games everywhere. Like we go on, you know, puzzles, games, coloring, all of it. It's literally, anyway. Yeah, they're saints, the child wranglers.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
I also did it for a year on the King and I production on Broadway with Lou Diamond Phillips. I did a year of child wrangling on that production. Anyway, so I think it was maybe 2 days later after moving to New York, I started that job at Tommy, and I started hanging out down in the pit with the musicians. I asked the music director if I could take some lessons. I was like, I'm a classical player. You know, I'd love to learn how to play, you know, rock and roll, and can you help me learn to do that? And he was super dismissive at the time. He was like, I only work with people who are really good. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I understand, you know. And like 3 days later, I waited at the stage door again for him. I'm like, I'm really good. I'm a really good player, and I think you should take a chance on me and hear me play.
Let's go. That's so
So I ended up taking some lessons with him. Quite, you know, 2-3 years later, he was the music director on Lion King. So that ended up, he gave me some other jobs along the way that were smaller. You know, and then ultimately when Lion King opened, Julie Taymor really wanted to have a diverse pit, which was sort of a first of the time, to not have, you know, only sort of middle-aged white men in the pit. So I got my first chance through him to get my own show. Gosh. So so that's how I got into musical theater from the classical world.
Well, and we're gonna jump into this will tie in, I swear to God, but we're gonna jump into a thing that I like to do, which is called a rapid round, which is basically just a whole bunch of, you know, silly little things, and just so people can get to know you a little bit more. But then this it's gonna end with a decent segue, I swear to God. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Wolverines or Broncos?
I never went to one single sports ball event at Western. But I've been to 2 football games here, so I'm gonna say Wolverines.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Blueberries or cherries?
Cherries, because I used to pick blueberries as a child, as a job, like child labor for like 6 hours a day. I still
Brutal. No blueberries. Got it.
hard
Those
on
are
me.
out. Fresh water or salt water?
Oh, fresh. That's easy.
That's a softball.
Lake
right
Michigan.
there. Favorite city in Michigan? Favorite city?
Favorite city in Michigan?
Yeah.
You have a favorite city in Michigan?
I do. It's a trick. Well, it's a trick. It's a bummer because it's not Grand Rapids. My favorite city in Michigan is Glen Arbor, which is up by Traverse City. My family grew up. I grew up going on vacation there when I was really little, around the water, blah blah blah. You know, so that's my favorite. Ann Arbor can be the favorite. I mean, you know, I'm sure the Grand Rapids people won't.
I ran the Traverse City Marathon, so I have a little soft spot for Traverse City because I actually made a marathon, you know, managed to do a marathon there.
That's awesome.
And then my husband proposed on Mackinac Island. So can I say Mackinac Island is favorite? Is that a city?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an island.
A city within the island, or?
Yeah. I'm sure.
He was gonna propose at the end of the Traverse City Marathon, but I was too tired, he felt, so he didn't propose there. He waited till the day after when we were at Mackinac.
Well, you know what? I have run a marathon, and for anybody who's run a marathon, I don't know if you really wanted to be proposed to when you come limping across a finish line, you know, dehydrated.
It would have been a dramatic moment.
Like, this is not happening. I don't know, maybe, but whatever. I'm sure Mackinac Island was gorgeous.
There you go.
And then the last, this is like asking somebody's favorite movie. Do you have a favorite band?
Favorite band?
Yeah, favorite band.
Oh gosh, I don't.
Yeah, because
I love all bands.
It's like asking if you have a favorite child or a favorite movie. But my question is, like, coming from the classical world, you were the rock star. You're my rock star teacher. You're Rent. You are Tommy. You teach this class in Michigan, this pop rock class where like we were singing Billy Joel songs and screaming at the top of our lungs. Like and then working on, we'll get to Hotel California and Air Supply. Like, I always felt you're a rock star. Like, did you grow up always loving Gershwin and classical music, or did you have like a real soft spot for?
Oh no, I'm a total rock pop junkie. Okay. Yeah, it was just that I grew up in a very sort of Christian conservative environment.
Yeah.
Where we weren't allowed to listen to that kind of music.
Yeah. Very footloose. Totally.
So I very much secretly would go down to my friend Lisa's house that was 3 doors down, where she had older sisters who had LPs of all the bands, and we listened to all the bands. So I've always been a secret rock pop junkie.
Nice. Okay, cool. Because that makes sense. As far as like, you know, you taught me how to, you know, be a rock star, and so that makes a lot of sense. All right, so I want to go into some trivia. And this is like the world's easiest trivia. This is like the world's easiest trivia section. I promise. I swear to God.
Oh, this is like actual trivia.
Yeah, it's like.
What?
But so, what was the first show that we worked on together?
Oh,
Monty, Rent, or Hotel California?
I'm gonna say Rent.
It was Rent because I played guitar in the band. My freshman year of college, freshman year at Michigan, you have to do crew. You have to work on the crew. All the actors have to work on crew. And I came to Cynthia and I said, I want to play guitar in your band. And she was like, what? And then I auditioned. I auditioned for you, like in your office. I played you a couple songs, and then sight read Will I
remember that.
And then got to play in your pit. And I got to tell you, I've never been cooler in my entire life than as a freshman in college playing guitar 2 in the band.
I still remember the day you did that audition, and I remember thinking, this isn't going to go well. It's some freshman thinks he can play guitar, and you came in, and I was like, oh, thank goodness he's so good. Oh, thank goodness I'm so happy. You know, like you solved so many issues because it's hard to find good guitar players.
Yeah,
so the fact that I still remember trying to keep my game face and being like, good, yeah, good.
Yes, okay, yes.
Yeah. Some practice should be fine.
All right, number 2.
This one.
You remember Okay, so in 2012, Joe played what instrument in the pit for the second act of the final performance of Chicago at the University of Michigan.
Oh, I will never forget. Our drummer had a medical emergency, ended up leaving at intermission. I sent him to the hospital at intermission and told Joe, "You are no longer dancing. You are now playing drums. You're going to sight read the rest of the show in the pit."
Yep. I sat down. It was one of the craziest, and I mean, it was unbelievable. I was dancing in the ensemble of Chicago with my mesh cut off shirt, my little bowler, bowler hat thing. And the drummer, who was the head of the drum faculty, unbelievable player, he was sick and he had to go to the hospital in the middle of the show. And so I came down to the pit in my mesh cut off shirt and sat down, and I just kept looking at you, like I'm like sweating and praying and crying kind of. And
can we just say you nailed it? Like
we got through it.
Nailed it.
The show must go on.
Have gone better for the circumstance we were in.
The show must go on in that way. Okay, this amazing. One of the guitar players in the pit of the Lion King, and he may have been a sub.
He was a sub.
Was in what?
But I sat next to him for a long time.
Did you? What famous 90s rock band?
Matchbox 20.
So this guy, he didn't, and he also didn't really read music, right? Like he played upside down.
And he played upside down.
Crazy.
Yeah. Just like Graham Russell
cool.
of Air Supply.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yes.
This is a silly one. After you wrote letters of recommendation for me to study abroad in 2010, Colin Hartman and I thanked you by making you what dinner for your family? I like C. This didn't happen. Joe is just trying to make himself look good to the viewers. Turkey sandwiches. Do you remember this? This was so stupid. So Colin, you wrote 1 million letters of recommendation for Colin and I to study abroad, and we made you and your family chicken parmesan.
I was gonna say chicken parm. You didn't let me answer. I was gonna say chicken parm.
It's so dumb. So done. So that's the end of our trivia section.
I wouldn't have remembered it had you not shown me that, but now I do.
So absolutely
that was
ridiculous.
So nice.
Well, I mean,
how
many letters of recommendation do you have to write? Like, for the love of God.
Do you know nobody else has ever made me chicken parm? Nobody.
There we go.
So maybe some students right now will be listening to this and they'll
be like, hey, at least a thank you note at the very least. I want to talk briefly about Hotel California and the Air Supply show, because while you're at U of M and you're still developing new musicals and working on things, and we got to work on a musical together based on the music of the Eagles, and I loved the Eagles. My dad loves the Eagles. I loved their music, and you called and said, hey, and we did a reading of Hotel California. And I still have a demo on my computer of Glenn Frey singing Peaceful Easy Feeling. Do you remember this? And he couldn't come to the reading because he was sick and he was in the hospital.
Yes.
And then he passed away
it was really the last project he ever worked on.
Which was just crazy. Do you
remember? It's devastating. Yeah.
Absolutely devastating. How did you get involved with that in these new shows that you're developing? I mean, how do you get involved with those while you're still at school? Still working.
Yeah, I actually have to give a shout out in both of these cases to Dan Loria. Dan Loria, many of your viewers might know, he was the dad in the Wonder Years. So if you remember that television show, that's sort of what a lot of people know Dan from. He's also one of the recurring characters on This Is Us right now. You might know him from that. He's done a ton of things, but Dan was our Gene Shepherd in the Broadway production of A Christmas Story. Yeah. And Dan and I became good friends, and one day during Christmas Story rehearsal, he said to me, he's like, hey, do you know Graham Russell? I was like, well, I know of him. He goes, oh, he's a good friend of mine. Should I have him stop by rehearsal? I was like, stop it. Don't, I was a massive Air Supply fan from the 80s. And I thought he was joking. It's Dan Loria. Why does Dan Loria know Air Supply? Right. But Air Supply happened to be playing at Benny King's, which was under our rehearsal studio. So they were right below us. And Dan and Graham are great friends. And so during one of the breaks, Graham came up. I still have this picture of me meeting Graham for the first time. I mean, like, wow. And anyway, it was shortly after that I just thought, why has no one ever done an Air Supply musical? And so I then got back in touch with Graham. I met him at one of his concerts and said, hey, can I pitch you an idea? And I pitched him sort of a half fleshed out idea for a musical, and he was really into it. And we ended up doing 2 musicals featuring Air Supply Music here at Michigan.
So cool.
Which was great. And then Eagles was also through Dan Lauria. Dan is also good friends with Robert Wool, who's another character actor. You would know him from.
I know that name.
His famous he was the radio. No, I'm blanking. Anyway, forget that. See if we could edit. I would have been like trim that little moment. Robert Wool. You all would know who he is. He's done a million movies. But anyway, Robert wrote the book for the Eagles musical. And so Dan said, hey, Robert's working on a musical with the Eagles. He's looking for a place to workshop it. I told him he has to do it with you. And that's how that connection happened. So of all people, cool. Dan Lauria has been my connection to the rock and roll world.
He's your dad. He's your like dad from the Wonder Years in real life.
He's my Wonder Years dad. Yes.
I love that. It was so fun to get to work on that material and you know, get to sing Air Supply and get to sing, you know, sing the Eagles. But you know, just I hope they continue to happen. I mean, that's the thing. Like these, you never know with new musicals. So hopefully they live on forever and ever. We're gonna do a little Q&A. And this is a question from Stephanie Lamos, and it's a question that I know you get a lot, but you know, I want to talk about advice for young actors, and I want to talk about advice for people in the arts. But like the advice is, I mean, she asked, what advice would you give to a high school student who wants to go to U of M? And I know you get that a lot, you know, from a musical theater perspective. What's your advice for the high school generation of wannabe Cynthias and wanna be Alex Finks?
Gosh, you know, that's a hard question. I think the training for musical theater is tricky because departments are small and they need to be small so that you can really get you know, a lot of hands-on training. But because of that, it becomes such a numbers game.
Right.
So if 1,500 people apply to your program and you can only take 20, you guarantee there are hundreds of incredibly talented kids who have every right to come to your department, but because of the numbers, simply can't.
Right.
We just can't take all the talented kids. So honestly, what I would say to anyone who wants to go into musical theater, whether it's at Michigan or anywhere else, it's you will land in the right place. The universe will put you where you're meant to be. It may not be where you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And not getting into a program is not a reflection of your talent.
Yeah.
Because the numbers game just means that you can't take every single talented person.
Yeah.
So it's really, I think it's just a mindset of knowing that any rejection is not necessarily a reflection of your talent at all.
No.
And that you will be put where you're meant to be. And you thrive where you're put because it's where you're meant to be.
I couldn't agree more. And also, like, you know, like I get rejected from like 5 times a week now, you know, like my whole life is rejection. So I feel like if you want to be in this business, you have to get used to the rejection part of it. And I tell students, I work with a company that helps kids train for musical theater auditions and trains them for, you know, picking rep and trying out for these BFA programs that, like, you know, once you start to get used to the rejection, if you get used to it early, you have a longer career because everybody has to deal with it at some point. I always say that, like, if you deal with it young, then you can deal with it. But like, if you start facing rejection for the first time at 35, that's not going to go great. You know, you're going to there's a lot of like consequences to like your mental health in that time if you have never experienced it before. But then I always say advice wise, like, to just consume as much as possible. Like, whether it's trying to get into University of Michigan or trying to get into Carnegie Mellon or wherever you want to go, like, you have to know what's going on, see as much as possible, you know, and just learn. Because then you just, I don't know, you know, I remember you saying to me, this was still the advice that I think of this day, that you have to work differently and you have to work like, you know, it's not 2 + 2 = 4 anymore. It's, you have to like listen to old cast albums and watch old performers and take a bunch of, become a better dancer and better musician and better singer and all of these things. But like that comes from consumption of art, Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate the
and
question.
thankfully now you can see so much online. You no
Right.
longer have to shell out the money necessarily to keep
Right.
seeing shows live.
Right.
Which can be really financially tricky, but you can find anything on YouTube now. And
Yeah.
now we're learning over Zoom. I mean, one of the benefits I think we're learning from Zoom is that you realize you have access to anybody. If
Right.
there's a teacher you want to work with that's in a different state that normally you never would have occurred to you to ask, because now
Yeah.
we've all learned, Zoom teaching works just fine.
Totally. Totally.
So
Yeah.
I think it's granted us access in ways we didn't have before. So I would say for anyone thinking of musical theater, reach out to people that you think can help you and you want to study with, and just ask. And chances are they'll be able to take you on.
Yeah, go up to them outside the stage door at Crazy
I'm
for You.
really good.
I'm really good. Well, don't do that. If you see Cynthia on the street, don't run up to her and let her go to brunch with her family. Okay, so we're getting to the end, and like always, and I meant to say this at the beginning, that we did cook up a little performance, a little something for everybody. I wanted to show you this picture before we get into it. Look at these idiots on the right. So that is from right to left. That's Ted Stevenson, Dan Belnavis, Danny Romeo, Joe Carroll, Colin Hartman, and Sam Lips. And we did the full Monty my senior year of college. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life because all of those, I was roommates with 3 of those guys. I lived at one point or another over the course of college. I lived with all of those guys.
Wow.
Sophomore year, I lived with Danny and anyway, it was unbelievable. So I asked Cynthia, hey, can we do something together virtually? And so I hope that we'll get into it in a second. Do you remember, do you have any memories from that show? I know you've done 10,000 shows with 10,000 classes of people, but
do you know what? I actually use you as an example often of this. I think this is an okay story to tell. I just remember this particular song. My babies were young, right? I had 2 little kids at that time.
Yep.
So the song I think you're about to show,
yeah,
for me was like, it just hit home so hard. And for, Joe Carroll circa 2000, whatever that was.
11, 12, yeah.
I just remember sort of feeling like I don't know how to get you to tap into this at a deeper level at your age and not having responsibility like this yet. And then I remember you took our little kid, actor, Milo, to a football game. And he was with only you, right? His parents were like in a different part of the stadium.
Yeah, we got really close. So like the character in the show had a really young son, as Cynthia alludes to, and I got really tight with the kid who was playing my son, and really tight with the family. And they were always around. They were great people. So they were at the football game. They texted me and I was like, I'll bring Milo to the student section. It'll be so fun. Like, all these crazy people around and he'll love it. And I'll bring him to the student section and we'll meet up with you guys after the second quarter or whatever. And then, you remember what happened.
Yeah. And I, not to share too much for Milo's own privacy, but a serious medical emergency happened for Milo. And Joe was the one, you were the one responsible.
Yeah.
My recollection, I could have made this up. My recollection is you and I both being pretty much in tears the next time we did that number because
couldn't get through it.
Now you got it. It was like
100%.
Oh, this is what it feels like to literally have someone's life in your hands that you are responsible for. And I was like, yes. That is it. I am sorry it had to. Thank God Milo was completely fine and everything ended well. But having a moment like that, you can't kind of just imagine that. It was so. I just remember that being such a defining moment.
Way too much. Art imitating life. I mean, the kid. Yeah. I mean, he's an adult now, but did like we're at the game and he collapsed in my arms and I had to pick him up and carry him out of the stadium basically. And then thank God he's totally fine. But then the next day is rehearsal and we're singing this number. and I just couldn't handle it. But anyway, with that in mind, here's Megan. Here's Breeze Off the River. There's a breeze off the river, through the crack in the window pane. There's my boy on the pillow, and I feel like I'm lost again. Everybody knows the secret. They all know what their life should be. And they move like a river. Everybody knows except for me. And I never feel like somebody calls a father. I can't explain when I look at you, kid. It's like a mirror. It spins my head and it wakes me. Like the breeze off the river. Every time I see your face, and it's strange but familiar, like a map of a better place. And sometimes I feel like I live in a shadow. Shadow's all I see. Then you jump straight up and you grab the moon and you make it shine on me. Where did you get it from? Everybody knows the secret. Well, I don't, and I never did. No, I don't know any secret. All I know is I love you, kid. All I know is I love you, kid. All I know. Yeah. Thank you.
That was so beautiful.
Oh my gosh. I
You
can't.
sing really well.
You play piano really well.
Oh, so nice to hear you sing again.
I wish we could do it in person, but you know, virtual iMovie, whatever, you know, good enough for now. I adore you. Thank you for that. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for your insight and for everything that you've done for me. And, you know, this was really fun.
Well, thank you. We're all of it, on behalf of all of us at U of M, we are all so darn proud of you. We just love you so much.
Oh my gosh.
We're so proud.
You're the best.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming, and thank you. Just you know, I'll keep saying thank you for. It's weird, you know, when you're talking to your teachers as peers, you're like, but you've given me everything. Thank you. But anyway, you're the best, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, everybody, thank you for joining us. Next week, not next week, March 31st, Lori Valdir, Broadway legend. Broadway credits include Sophie Mumpkin, Catherine Understudy, Newsies, a million different things. She was about to be in the Plaza Suite on Broadway, and they were about to have their final dress rehearsal. And if you have to begin previews, the day that Broadway was shut down. Can't wait to talk to her. Lori and I did a production of Grease together for like a weekend at Civic Theater. You know her. We like her. We'll see you on the 31st. Thank you all so